Welcome, friends, to this special commemorative meeting in honor of the life and work of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Russian noblewoman, also known as a lion-hearted esoteric she. Tomorrow, May 8, 2017, will mark the 126th year since HPB left her body. Theosophical lodges around the world honor her by celebrating White Lotus Day. For example, we have here an email from our friends at the ULT Bombay. Dear friends, we send you eternal greetings and all good wishes on the auspicious occasion of White Lotus Day, which marks the passing away of our teacher, H.P. Blavatsky. The Bombay Lodge will observe the occasion by holding a special meeting on Sunday, May 7, 2017 at 6:15 p.m., which is about now, remembering the life of HPB and her message by having a talk on HPB and her works. White Lotus Day is not a memorial to HPB's person or personality, or to her individual thoughts or wit, but it is a devotional memorial to celebrate the ageless signpost she left for us to the path of divine wisdom. This path entails the ever-becoming of spiritual truth. It is in the spiritualized facts, of correspondences, of analogies, of symbols and glyphs that we find the enduring work that HPB named Theosophy. A work that she transcribed from the Masters of Wisdom. A message showing the path for us to make our own and to eventually become Masters of Wisdom ourselves. So she was acting as ambassador, bridging the gulf between the knowledge of today and the ancient spiritual wisdom kept by the trans-Himalayan masters. HPB came to the world at large. She repeatedly advised us not to follow her or her path, but to follow the path she showed the masters that are behind. By communing and redirecting lives to the work of HPB, we participate in the continual lighting up of Manas. We attune ourselves with the task of creating the means by which each human can see through this illusory material existence and open our hearts to charity, justice, and generosity. Through self-education and self-efforts, we create our own path that follows the path that she showed to the state that she modeled. It is fitting that we call this day White Lotus Day, as the lotus is a highly significant symbol that coincides with the message of Theosophy. The sacred doctrine tells us that the lotus is the flower sacred to nature and her gods. It represents the abstract and the concrete universes, standing as the emblem of the productive powers of both spiritual and physical nature. The seeds of the lotus contain, even before they germinate, perfectly formed leaves. the miniature shapes of the plants they will become. Nature thus giving us a specimen of the preformation of its production. The lotus signifies the emanation of the objective from the subjective. Divine ideation passing from the abstract into the concrete or visible form. Through analogy and correspondence, we can use the symbol of the lotus and HPB's other illustrations to see that everything from the cosmos to man and everything around us was rooted in the divine spark from the one all, gradually passing through the spiritual world, materializing from primordial matter and differentiating into numerous forms. Man is the most developed form on earth. Man was rooted into the muck-yuck of matter for experience in and uplifting of the various kingdoms of nature. Man was nourished and pushed forward by the natural impulse of nature until the lighting of mind occurred, and man was ready to use his own self-induced and self-devised methods to develop his inner psychic feeling nature as he was nourished by the yet misty illusions of life in the material world, and finally make his way to the surface of the pond, connect with the sun, and unfold from within outward his higher spiritual nature, thus evolving into the beautiful flower that he is. Connected with the lotus symbol, we have the theosophical path laid out through HPB to guide our development through this elusive world and beyond. As spiritual entities, we maximize our eternal, we maximize our eternal internal potential to learn and grow. Through the astral plane, as pointed out in the Light of Asia and in the signposts left by HPB to guide us through the Makya, and for us to point out the way for others. We need not get diverted by the false and fanciful stops and starts we encounter in a world that seems to be filled with self-styled spiritual leaders, modern life coaches, and the like. We already have the signposts and the principles she laid out in the recommended publications to guide us as we work to bring forth the knowledge, the discrimination, the wisdom needed to act timely with courage and clear vision. Within the jewel of the lotus in each of us lies the potential to defer the temporary bliss of materialism so that we may help others and help ourselves and others achieve a soul life free of attachments, appetites, passions, anxieties, fear, and anger. HPV's teachings and example fill men's heart with courage and clear vision while illuminating the world of thought. Her writings give us the means to uplift both our lives and the lives of others through a growing understanding as we endeavor to live up to the three objects. One, developing a nucleus of universal brotherhood. Two, demonstrating the importance of studying ancient to modern religions, philosophies, and sciences. And 3, investigating the unexplained laws of nature and the psychic and spiritual powers latent in man as part of our own individual efforts to be as ethical and pure as we can be. Every one of us can do something within our own spheres of influence to help usher us from this dark iron age to the golden age of light that we keep hearing about. What we may think of as the smallest act, like picking up a banana peel to prevent injury to another, is just as spiritually important as the greatest accomplishment of our world leaders. Theosophy encourages us to be all that we can be, but says that we have done enough if we have done the best that we can do. Do we truly understand that we are eternal souls, currently transported in transient bodies and personalities, and that our every thought and action helps us to establish our future and that of the world around us? Do we steadfastly work to control our thoughts and keep our every moment focused on advancing the 3 objects just discussed? And if we value this jewel of theosophy that points the way to eradicating ignorance and superstition, the way to uproot selfishness and separateness, and the way to laying a sound basis for universal brotherhood, as we journey through matter on our way back to the source of all life, this birthright of humankind, what can we commit ourselves to in order to help the few spread, broadcast these teachings in their purity, and otherwise keep the chain unbroken, so that HPV's life of dedication to humanity will live on, and to help her request be realized, that we not allow her incarnation to be in vain. HPV's life can be divided into 3 phases. 1, her early life. 2, the time of her preparation for the work she was to do. And 3, her public service aimed at advancing humanity. Phase 1. HPV was born at 1:42 a.m. on August 11-12, 1831. That's July 30-31 for the Russian calendar in use at the time. A cholera epidemic was going on, and she was a preemie. So immediate baptism was decided upon. Her life on this earth started in chaos as a sleepy child's candle set the presiding priest role of Williams. HPV's dad was a colonel in the Russian cavalry. She took to horseback riding at the nearby army garrison. She became known for her daring and unconventionality, such as not following the tradition of ladies riding side saddle. She was not afraid to ride any horse. HPV's honesty of expression seemed daring and abrupt, and horrified some of the servants, particularly in view of her psychic powers. HPV's mother was an accomplished and well-known writer. She died before HPV's 11th birthday. Her grandmother was a princess, and her grandfather was privy counselor to the Tsar. Her great-grandfather was a Kabbalist, and a prince, and a student of alchemy and magic. She would often be found reading in his library when she visited him. Phase 2. When in London at the age of about 19, HPB entered the second phase of her life when she recognized in Hyde Park one that she had seen in her dreams. Master Moria gave her a preview of her future mission and work. She followed Master Moria's direction unerringly, without any swerving from the lines laid down. HPB laid the groundwork for tearing down, exposing, and purifying the religion of the day of its dogma and dross, so we can get an idea of the truths that underlie each and all. Both she and William Q. Judge were sui generis. Both indicated that they had worked with each other in prior lives. Their theosophical work was totally in sync with each other. Hers focused on the entire world, and Mr. Judge's focused on making the path she showed more understandable to we in the West. HPB traveled widely, including to Canada and crossing the Rocky Mountains on a covered wagon. She also energized other places with her presence, including Mexico, South America, the West Indies, India, Tibet, and the list goes on, while in search of those who might help with the philosophical and ethical mission she had to do. Some of my fellow students will read from 3 devotional books, followed by a talk on phase 3 of HPB's life, the phase of her 20 years of public service. We will conclude with a period of fellowship where we will express oneness in furthering the objects of universal brotherhood. We will reconvene afternoon to continue our readings and discussions of HPB's Key to Theosophy. And now for the first reading.
This reading is from the Bhagavad-Gita. Arjuna, what, O Keshava, is the description of that wise and devoted man who is fixed in contemplation and confirmed in spiritual knowledge? What may such a sage declare? Where may he dwell? Does he move and act like other men? Krishna, man is said to be confirmed in spiritual knowledge when he forsaketh every desire which entereth into his heart, and of himself is happy and content in the self through the self. His mind is undisturbed in adversity. He is happy and contented in prosperity, and he is a stranger to anxiety, fear, and anger. Such a man is called a muni. When in every condition he receives each event, whether favorable or unfavorable, with an equal mind, which neither likes nor dislikes. His wisdom is established, and having met good or evil, neither rejoiceth at the one nor is cast down by the other. He is confirmed in spiritual knowledge when, like the tortoise, he can draw in all his senses and restrain them from their wanted purposes. The hungry man loseth sight of every other object but the gratification of his appetite, and when he is become acquainted with the Supreme, he loseth all taste for objects of whatever kind. The tumultuous senses and organs hurry away by force the heart even of the wise man, who striveth after perfection. Let a man restraining all these remain in devotion at rest in me, his true self. For he who hath his senses and organs in control possesses spiritual knowledge. He who attendeth to the inclinations of the senses, in them hath a concern. From this concern is created passion. From passion, anger. From anger is produced delusion. From delusion, the loss of the memory. From the loss of memory, loss of discrimination. And from loss of discrimination, loss of all. But he who, free from attachment or repulsion for objects, experienceth them through the senses and organs, with his heart obedient to his will, attains to tranquility of thought. And this tranquil state attained therefrom shall soon result a separation from all troubles. And his mind, being thus at ease, fixed upon one object, it embraceth wisdom from all sides. The man whose heart and mind are not at rest is without wisdom, or the power of contemplation. Who doth not practice reflection hath no calm. And how can a man without calm obtain happiness? The uncontrolled heart, following the dictates of the moving passions, snatcheth away his spiritual knowledge, as the storm the bark upon the raging ocean. Therefore, O great armed one, he is possessed of spiritual knowledge, whose senses are withheld from objects of sense. What is night to those who are unenlightened is as day to his gaze. What seems as day is known to him as night, the night of ignorance. Such is the self-governed sage.
The second reading is from The Voice of the Silence. Arhats and sages of the boundless vision are rare as is the blossom of the Udambara tree. Arhats are born at midnight hour, together with the sacred plant of 9 and 7 stalks, the holy flower that opes and blooms in darkness, out of the pure dew and on the frozen bed of snow-capped heights, heights that are trodden by no sinful foot. No Arhan, O Lanu, becomes one in that birth, when for the first the soul begins to long for final liberation. Yet, O thou anxious one, no warrior volunteering fight in the fierce strife between the living and the dead, not one recruit can ever be refused the right to enter on the path that leads towards the field of battle. For either he shall win or he shall fall. Yeah, if he conquers, nirvana shall be his. Before he casts his shadow off his mortal coil, that pregnant cause of anguish and illimitable pain, in him will men a great and holy Buddha honor. And if he falls, even then he does not fall in vain. The enemies he slew in the last battle will not return to life in the next birth that will be his. But if thou wouldst nirvana reach, or cast the prize away, let not the fruit of action and inaction be thy motive, O thou of dauntless heart. Know that the bodhisattva who liberation changes for renunciation to don the miseries of secret life is called thrice honored, O thou candidate for woe throughout the cycles. The path is one, disciple, yet in the end twofold. Marked are its stages by 4 and 7 portals. At one end, bliss immediate, and at the other, bliss deferred. Both are of merit the reward. The choice is thine. The one becomes the two, the open and the secret. The first one leadeth to the goal, the second to self-immolation. When to the permanent is sacrificed the mutable, the prize is thine, the drop returneth whence it came. The open path leads to the changeless change, nirvana, the glorious state of absoluteness, the bliss past human thought. Thus, the first path is liberation, but the second path is renunciation, and therefore is called the path of woe. That secret path leads the Arhan to mental woe unspeakable, woe for the living dead, and helpless pity for the men of karmic sorrow, the fruit of karma sages dare not still. For it is written, teach to eschew all causes, the ripple of effect. As the great tidal wave, thou shalt let run its course. The open way, no sooner hast thou reached its goal, will lead thee to reject the bodhisattvic body, and make thee enter the thrice glorious state of Dharmakaya, which is oblivion of the world and men forever. The secret way leads also to paranirvanic bliss, but at the close of kalpas without number, nirvana is gained and lost from boundless pity and compassion for the world of deluded mortals. But it is said, the last shall be the greatest. Samyak Sambuddha, the teacher of perfection, gave up his self for the salvation of the world by stopping at the threshold of nirvana, the pure state. Thou hast the knowledge now concerning the two ways. Thy time will come for choice, O thou of eager soul, when thou hast reached the end and passed the 7 portals. Thy mind is clear. No more art thou entangled in delusive thoughts, for thou hast learned all. Unveiled stands truth, and looks thee sternly in the face. She says, sweet are the fruits of rest and liberation for the sake of self, but sweeter still the fruits of long and bitter duty. Aye, renunciation for the sake of others, of suffering fellow men. He who becomes Pratyeka Buddha makes his obeisance but to his self. The Bodhisattva who has won the battle, who holds the prize within his palm, yet says in his divine compassion, for others' sake this great reward I yield, accomplishes the greater renunciation. A savior of the world is he. Behold, the goal of bliss and the long path of woe are at the furthest end. Thou canst choose either, O aspirant to sorrow, throughout the coming cycles.
The third reading is from the Light of Asia. Pray not, darkness will not brighten. Ask not from the silence, for it cannot speak. Vex not your mournful minds with pious pains, our brothers, sisters, seek. Not from the helpless gods by gift and hymn, nor bribe with blood, nor feed with fruit and cakes. Within yourselves deliverance must be sought, each man his prison makes. Each hath such lordship as the loftiest ones, nay, for with powers above, around, below, as with all flesh and whatsoever lives, act maketh joy and woe. What hath been bringeth what shall be and is, wars better, last for first, and first for last. The angels in the heavens of gladness reap fruits of a holy fast. The devils in the underworlds were out, deeds that were wicked and in an age gone by. Nothing endures fair, virtues waste with time. Foul sins grow purged thereby. Who toiled a slave may come anew a prince, for gentle worthiness and merit won. Who ruled a king may wander earth in rags, for things done and undone. Higher than Indra's ye may lift your lot, and sink it lower than the worm or gnat. The end of many myriad lives is this, the end of myriads that. Only while turns this wheel invisible, no pause, no peace, no stay in place can be. Who mounts will fall, who falls may mount, the spokes go round unceasingly. If ye lay bound upon the wheel of change, and no way were of breaking from the chain, The heart of boundless being is a curse. The soul of things felt pain. Ye are not bound. The soul of things sweet. The heart of being is celestial rest. Stronger than woe is will. That which was good doth pass to better best. I, Bud, who wept with all my brother's tears, whose heart was broken by a whole world's woe, laugh and am glad, for there is liberty. Ho, ye who suffer, know. Ye suffer from yourselves, none else compels. None other holds you that you live and die, and whirl upon the wheel, and hug and kiss its spokes of agony. Its tire of tears, its nave of nothingness. Behold, I show you truth, lower than hell, higher than heaven, outside the utmost stars. Farther than Brahm doth dwell. Before beginning and without an end, a space eternal and a surety sure, he speaks the power divine, which moves to good, only its law endure.
HPB came to the United States in July of 1873, and her mission and her life was dedicated from there on to the philosophy that she brought from the Master's Lodge as their messenger and the teacher to the world. She knew that the Anglo-Saxon race would eventually be kind of controlling everything around the world. So she had to write her books in English for that need. In 5 years from the day she came to the States, she had written Isis Unveiled. In order to truly understand HPB and her mission, it means that we have to understand all and everything that is written in the Isis, all and everything that is written in the Secret Doctrine, and be able to apply that philosophy to ourselves and to the nation that we belong to, and see what kind of change it has brought about in our universe today. This is not a small task for any human soul to undertake. However, we can learn who and what we are. We can learn who HPB was only through her occultism and our own. We cannot touch HPB's occultism unless we approach it through our own occultism ourselves. So when we look at human beings around us, there's a personality. There is that portion that is visible and perhaps we understand quite well. But the inner man, the inner faculties of the inner man, and the enduring fontal part of that nature, perhaps partially known to the person himself or herself, but not very well known to any outsider. So in order to understand the occultism of HPB then, we have to approach our own occultism. When we try this, we find that to sink into the depth of that inner man, we find our plumb line short. There are truly unsounded depths in every human heart, and through that part of our nature, only can we then understand HPB's occultism. Let us look at what it was that she did. She came as a moral pioneer. What was her objective? The objective was to change the mind and body of the race. Remember, please, that she came in the 19th century, but her hope was for the future centuries to come. in order to understand her then, we have to look at principles. What was the principles? She, as you know, wrote those principles in her book. She wrote the principles of nature and corresponded the principles of human nature to it. What about our principles? Who knows them but ourselves? And who knows if our conduct is according to our principles or not? So, to understand her then, she over and over and over again, for 17 years, from 1875 to 91, reiterated it. She didn't make a secret of it. She said it over and over again. And she lived in a pitiless and uncloaked publicity. The world was divided into two sectors, the East and the West. The conventionalism of the East and the West kind of composed two camps of opposition to what she had brought. What did she bring? She had come, excuse me, the sectarianism of the time, camouflaged under religion, because every religion is sectarian. It has its own dogma that it promulgates. What about the other camp? Well, materialism of the age, couched as and robed in science. So she came to actually see if she could make inroads in both of those areas. What did she put forth? She put forth that God is not a being, because this is what the external dogma is. The religions teach that God is a being. She says God is not a being. There is one basis from which all good and evil comes from. And there is one law. And under that law, cycles repeat themselves over and over again. And she told us that pain and bliss comes from that law. And that nature is divinely impartial and impersonal. So, what did the sectarians look at her for when she proposed this impartiality and impersonality? They considered her their enemy. What about the scientists? Well, they probably thought she was a fanatic. What about her ideals? The first speaker talked about the objects of universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, caste, color, sex, or condition. And what was the basis of that hope? That each human soul is, and fundamentally, from one supreme soul. So our identity is same. We come from the same supreme soul. Which sect at that time would have accepted the first object of the Theosophical Society? Because when you look around even today, do we see the poor and the rich considered the same? The white and the black considered the same? And do those who consider themselves keeping the Sabbath fraternize with sinful, errant, and weak natures? And what about Christianity and Western science and Western religion that look upon women as inferior to men, or the black or the yellow race as inferior to the white? In the 144 years of her lending, has this changed? Her second ideal was to teach all of her students and all those people who were attracted to Theosophy to compare and contrast, and to put practice against facts, to see whether what they believed in was any superior to their neighbor's belief, to compare that sectarian faith, and for materialists to consider what nature is patterned after. Was it patterned after a model of destruction or for building? What about the third object? To study and investigate the unexplained laws of nature and unknown powers latent in men. As we said, she wrote her books in English. And today, there are many hundreds of men and women all over the world, in every caste and every creed, who look at HPB with devotion, gratitude, and love, because they understand that what she wrote in Isis Unveiled was through her own light that she had brought from the source. That what they read themselves is from that light. They understand it. They know it. Mr. Judge wrote shortly after her death, "They may adduce many proofs which hug to the breast would damn angels and gods." This is about HPB. And he tells us we don't need Olcott, Sinnett, or Besant, or anybody else's word for that matter, or any of the external foes of her mission, nor even Mr. Judge's evaluation, by the way, which is the only true one, to get to know her. In order to know her principles, he tells us, study Isis Unveiled. And he adds, in order to know the principles of Jesus of Nazareth, we don't need to go to pope, priest, or church. All we have to do is read the 5th chapter of Matthew. And that will tell us, he says, all that we need to know about the Christ principle. So, if we know her ideals, and we look at the 3 objects, what do we see? Was she true to her principles? Did she embody her ideals? Because if she did, there was a great teacher proved by a great teaching. There was a great leader of mankind proved by the noblest of ideals. And there in woman form was the great warrior on this earth since the days of Krishna Avatar 51 centuries ago. Do you know that we can read everything she wrote? Because she wrote ceaselessly. But never shall we find a word of conceit. Never will we find a word of malice or ill will. Never will we find that pride, hatred, ambition, and lust of possessions in her. None of these found expression in her. These were totally absent from her, as darkness is absent from the sun. And this is the occultism of HPB. Now let us compare our principles with hers. What do we believe in? That nature proceeds from a personal source, is conducted upon a personal basis, that personal favors can be obtained from a supreme being. This is the religion even today. Remember, we are still in the 21st century. So we believe that there is not a spiritual, a moral, an intellectual law of sowing and reaping. And all know there is a physical law. We know the physical law, but the others, we don't pay any attention to it. So hence, humanity is constantly trying to entice nature, seduce it, or rubbish it, materialism. So, all our ideas, maybe not necessarily bad, are earthly, personal, mutable, and sordid. Hers were ancient, constant, and eternal spirit, unchanging ideals. So, seeing the same life everywhere, seeing the same essence in all things, whether good or bad, she bestowed her labors unselfishly upon all men, good and bad alike. And for 40 years that she was struggling with dissemination of the truth to the best that it could be given out, she was also accused of being immoral. And this, the great bulk of humanity heard at that time, and unfortunately for us, some of them believed it. But HPB was not capable of any immorality because she was an unvirgin. So, if we study her statements of principle, her constant reiteration of her ideals, and watch her conduct under calumny, slander, ridicule, revilement, and worst of all, under that terrible insult to the soul, betrayal and ingratitude at the hands of those she strove only to aid, we will find there immorality, a spiritual, intellectual, psychic, universal that transcends any ideal picture to mankind. So then, she was crucified just like Jesus was, but Jesus was crucified supposedly on a cross for 4 hours by soldiers. What about her? For 17 years, she had to deal with the mercenaries of the 2 continents. Did she sympathize with herself? Did she pity herself? No, never. Seeing the law of life, knowing that the persecutor and the betrayer, friend and follower, were all her brothers, she but played the part of the father of the prodigal son. She embodied the truth. She embodied what she brought from the source others talked about. So the secret is very simple. The world lacks in everything that is worthwhile. She came to give to men who considered them as bodies. She came to show them that they were souls. To those men of science who have learning and information, she came to give knowledge. So, can we say that these acquisitions do not become dust and ashes unless they are truly used to ameliorate the suffering of humanity and to uplift the mind and soul of humanity? So, what she wrote, she did. And this is her mission and her life. So, we see from this comparison the descent of divinity on earth through her. She started the esoteric section, and of course she constantly reiterated the objects of the Theosophical Society, and nowhere can be found anything close to what she brought and wrote in church, a state, or a school. So, should we ask the question, was her mission a failure? Was her occultism defeated? Not in the least. However short those true students of Theosophy's understanding is, however erroneous their perception of her vast nature, they know that the light that shines comes from her by reading those books. So, the sectarian world then, she put into a ferment. Look around the world today. There is a ferment in religion, there is a ferment in science, there is a ferment in the spiritualists themselves. The priests and parishioners are looking for new knowledge, new, when you look around, they're coming up with new song. There's one in our own neighborhood, new song. Why is it new? if the old was worth keeping, would we come up with something new? Her principles were never changing, but look at what the religions are doing. But nevertheless, the ferment is going on. We're seeking. All humanity is doing this at this time. Why? Because HPB interjected those ideas into the mind of humanity. She was very successful in doing it. It might not show results very fast, but in the end, we are going to smash priestcraft, defeat statecraft, use capitalism for the benefit of all, and look at the property rights of today. Women could not own property in the previous centuries, but they do now, so there has been some changes. So out of this larval stage of fermentation, this rotting chrysalis will emerge into a new civilization, will emerge into a pure religion for all, a new conception of the purpose of life, evolution as immortal spiritual entities. We're to achieve this. So this is all occultism of HPB. Mr. Judge writes, "Judge not that ye be not judged, for with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. Heaped up, pressed down, running over." They met HPB, but did they profit? Not many. If her mission is a failure, to those who fail to study her principles, adopt her ideals, emulate her conduct, it is because they refuse to follow the path that she showed. But today on earth, everywhere, there are men and women in every country, every clime, every race, every creed, who are studying her enunciation of principles, who are striving to assimilate into their own lives the ideals that she held dear, who are doing their utmost to follow the path she showed, the masters who are behind. And after a couple generations, HPB is the most potent living influence on this earth today. Does Queen Elizabeth have any influence? Not really. What about George Washington? None. Could his name evoke the magic word whereby today men would track bleeding naked feet over jagged ice as they did in Valley Forge? No. Gone is that magic and that inspiration that gave us this flag and this freedom that as people we daily abuse. But HPB coming at a cyclic interval, coming in a vast perihelion indeed, started a fire burning that nothing can quench 100, 1,000, 10,000 years from now. That presence will still seem ever clear, ever near, ever dear to those who brush in any way the occultism of HPB. The appreciation of her occultism is in the hundreds of men and women to whom HPB is a much more real presence than any body, physical body, earthly thing. To carry on her work, to see the leaven she gave, the seed she sowed, shall be watered, if need be, through their blood and their tears, is the emulation of occultism of HPB. And we will finish with this statement from HPB. Every pledge or promise, unless built upon 4 pillars, absolute sincerity, unflinching determination, unselfishness of purpose, and moral power, which makes the fourth support and equipposes the other three pillars, is an insecure building. The pledges of those who are sure of the strength of the fourth, the moral power alone, are recorded. HPB. And one other quote. Madame Blavatsky was the victim of imperfect sympathies. The world failed to know her. That failure was its own great loss. I do not believe in the success of the movement unless you assimilate Master or myself, unless you work with me and them hand in hand and heart to heart. Yes, let him who offers himself to masters as a chela unreservedly, let him do what he can if he would ever see them. Then things were done because I alone was responsible for the issues. I alone had to bear karma in case of failure and no reward in case of success. I saw the TS would be smashed or that I had to offer myself as the scapegoat for atonement. It is the latter I did. The TS lives, I am killed. Killed in my honor, fame, name, in everything HPB held near and dear. For this body is mine, and I feel acutely through it. I mere err in my powers as HPB. I have not worked and toiled for 40 years, playing parts, risking my future reward, and taking karma upon this unfortunate appearance to serve them without being permitted to have some voice in the matter. HPB is not infallible. HPB is an old, rotten, sick, worn-out body, but it is the best I can have in this cycle. Hence follow the path I show. The masters that are behind, do not follow me or my path. When I'm dead and gone in this body, then you will know the truth, the whole truth. Then will you know that I have never been false to anyone, nor have I deceived anyone, but had many a time to allow them to deceive themselves, for I had no right to interfere with their karma. Oh ye foolish blind moles, all of you, who was able to offer himself in sacrifice as I did. Thank you.